Sure.
is.
I'll go by your agenda because I think you had Sawyer Street first.
Okay, Sawyer Street Courts first.
So as you might have seen, we actually started this project in the fall. Our goal is to have two basketball courts there. We had some original funding from CPC. We've set aside some money in our basketball program for the last couple of years. We had a donation from the Youth Basketball Association. So we got the project going. IREA came in and, we took the old backboards out. We're changing the court around to having two side by side. We have a very popular summer basketball league that has just blown up in the last couple of years. It started with, I think, 75 kids. We're up to 250. So this will actually make us take more children. So in the Beechwood for the public to use, because we're using this from early June to early August. We have basketball every night at Sawyer Street, for 6 to 10 or 6 to 9. So it's a very popular league. So it's something we've always looked at to do, make that court bigger. But we've had a couple challenges. We had to replace some trees that were taken down. And, based on the fact that we lost last summer's basketball league, we lost the Thanksgiving Day road race, which is another contributor to this project, we fell behind a little bit. So we have the money to put the backboards up. We have money to put white lines down. But what we're hoping to do is, after a summer of basketball, after the court cures itself, is to repaint it and also to replace the trees that were removed. So we're just a little bit short. I was playing with the numbers. According to the request I sent to you guys back in the fall was basically about 20,000 plus a contingency fee. So it was 25 total. But we've been looking at the numbers a little bit, and actually I think we're only going to need about 12 to 15, plus a contingency. So a little bit less than 25. So we're still obviously renegotiating, and the costs have gone up a little bit on some of the things, but we have a cost to repaint the court of about 9,000, 5 trees. We had a little bit extra landscaping money there because it might be needed now because that Sawyer Street project that was done has done some damage to the area that we want to plant the trees. So we might need some groundwork done first too, but so that's where we stand with that project. I don't know if there's any questions for anybody or.
So is this additional money you need for the Sawyer Street?
Yes, like I said, we might not have needed this if we could have played basketball last summer, and we could have had that road race last, 2 or 3 months ago. We would have been close to cover the entire cost, but we had some unexpected costs. There was a drain pipe that had to be redone, because it was crossing where the court was, so that was a $5,000 expense. We didn't have a contingency fee originally, so that was one issue. But like I said, we had to replace the trees that were taken down, and there was a drain pipe that had to be removed a little bit to get out of the way. So this is additional funds to finish the project.
What would the total project be when you're finished with this 25,000?
About 100,000.
And some of
What
that,
happens if you don't get this 25 from us?
Well, like I said, what we're doing here is painting the surface of the court in the fall. We're just gonna put white lines down this spring. Well, first put the backboards up. We have the funding for that. Put white lines down, which we have the funding for, which we could call it a day there, but our goal was always to make it a nice looking court. And put, and then also the trees are an issue. We need to replace the trees that were removed by mistake. We need to relocate some trees.
so Ted, the New England seal coating quote for $8,685 is what we're talking about today, along with
and trees. I mean, there's about 5 trees that have to be removed. So I talked to Chris Kennedy and also DPW, and they're obviously the trees aren't that expensive. We're thinking about $500 a tree and then $500 to install it. We had 8,000 in the original request because just as an overlay in case we needed it. This is my vice chair here, Tim Bernica's here. So if he wants to talk. I don't know how much he's heard of my conversation.
I did not hear most of that, but it sounds like you got it wrapped up pretty well with the seal coating and the painting and the replacement of the trees.
So anybody have any questions on the Sawyer Street courts?
Well, Ted, I'm just going to make a comment, if I may. I was alerted by the Tree and Park Department that the trees had been taken down. You should know the history of those. We had those done 10 years ago. They were pears. They were expensive. They were part of the vitalization. They were meant to beautify that area. We were extremely disappointed to see those things hacked down. It was really almost desecration as we saw it. Many of us really saw it as desecration to do that, really that bad. Particularly where they were brand new, they were put in there specifically to try to beautify that place and to make the actual basketball court look a lot more attractive. We did all of that, and then to have it all taken down, and now to have it actually have to be brought back in again because of a mistake. I really extremely disappointing in what happened there, to be perfectly honest with you. So a lot of history with that, and so I hope we don't actually go forward on any of these projects without talking with a few people about what the history is associated with these projects and why, in fact, we get disappointed when we see them. And I do think putting that amount of asphalt into there is not attractive. I understand why you have a lot of people who want to play basketball, but adding that much asphalt and taking away actually permeable soil is not attractive to me anymore. Got to think about some of this stuff before we actually go ahead and just do them. So anyway, sorry about that, Ted, but it's a real feelings about that one. And so did other people who, when they saw it, were appalled. So got to know.
Thank you. Michael, you have Mike Dick,
Yeah,
a question?
actually, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what happened with those trees. How much they cost us in the first place? And did it cost us? I'm assuming it did.
I could probably find out for you, Mike, because I was in charge of that project at the time, and we did the trees throughout the entire downtown area at the time. They were pear trees, but I'd have to go back and find out what the cost was. But I certainly have it somewhere.
Who made the decision to remove them? Whose call was it?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I know on the sketch that was given to us, the trees weren't marked. So that was a concern that, the court was a little wide and was moved away from the playground. So that was one of the issues. Hopefully the asphalt imprint, actually, having the two courts side by side, we try to keep the footprint as small as possible. And Ralph, I did talk to Andy. Andy did tell me that you two, Andy from DPW, gave me all his history with YouTube and told me the trees that, which trees should be replaced, the ones you put there. So I mentioned that to Chris Kennedy this morning, the trees that you and Andy put in. So, just was in the overall sketch that showed the previous court on top of where the new court is now, the trees weren't right marked.
Yeah, but don't you go out to the site and look at the site and sort of imagine where these courts going to go and, uh-oh, those are trees there. I mean, to go by a sketch doesn't sound really thoughtful. Forgive me because I don't know, but have the courts already been paved? Is the asphalt down and you're just looking to paint the courts?
Yes,
Or do you still have paving to do?
paving is all done.
Right, and this was cleared by conservation?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a conservation project at the time, so.
No, are you within or near the buffer zone to the resource down at the bottom? I'm assuming that you're talking about the area behind the library.
Yeah.
Are we talking about that site?
Yes.
Okay, and that is near a resource? I would just like to know that this was done properly. It sounds like you did made a couple problems for yourselves down there. But my original question is, can you give me an idea of the number of people per week that use those courts? And you know, if it's paved, it's paved and what's done is done, but I would not be in favor of landscape improvements at this point. To me, that has nothing to do with the ability to play basketball. It might have something to do with the way it looks, but if we are trying to squeeze more projects than we can afford into our allocated amount, then that would be one of the first things I would look to remove on the request.
I guess the
So
first,
just give me a sense of how much use that those courts get. And when is your high season? Is it middle of summer? Is it school year? Give me a sense of what the use is like.
well, I mean, so there's two options. There's two, I'll let Tim talk about the youth basketball program, but on a regular day, those courts are very, you know, in the spring, summer, and fall, we have kids there all day long. After school, the college kids use it. But like I said, we started the summer basketball league, I think 4 years ago, and it keeps on increasing every year. And one of the things that I always wish for is always have one court open for high school and college kids. So they, you know, leave Beechwood. Right now, we were going using two courts, Sawyer Street and Beechwood. The goal is to leave Beechwood for the public, you know, because we're playing four nights a week on both courts. So that's one of our steps, was to limit how much we take away from the public access. But pretty much all, you know, if you went by Beechwood at all this, since COVID started, it's been, they actually had to take the backboards down recently because it was so, the usage was so heavy. And they were concerned about COVID. But I'll let Tim mention, you know, about the basketball program a little bit. So
Yeah, so Mike, the high season is probably between June and August. We have a basketball program, an outdoor basketball program that we run for kids in grades 5 through 9. And we're thinking this year about possibly expanding that to a, if there's interest in the high school level, we're thinking about trying to expand that. So if we've got roughly, the way it had been mapped out in previous years is we played 4 games a night, 4 days a week. So if you want to do that and say, okay, that's 16 games and each game has 20 kids in it, but 10 person a team. So you're kind of looking at, say, 320 people using, now there's double counting there. It's not 320 individuals, although the numbers are pretty high for the summer basketball. So, you know, somewhere on the order of, if you want to throw in the kids that are playing after school, about 500 people a day, sorry, a week, use the court in the past. And if you want to maybe add in some number for Beechwood, that, and as Ted said, we're trying to kind of consolidate the youth program down here behind the library to leave Beechwood for older kids, adults, you know, college kids generally. That's kind of a good rough estimate, something like, you know, 500 or so people a week during the summer months.
Yeah, no, that's, I can see it's a definite benefit to the public. That's a good heavy use. On the youth programs, is there any appetite at all for collecting user fees to help offset some of these costs?
So the rec department, or the rec program, charges a fee to the individuals to play for the season.
Okay.
Where this year, what we're doing, because of COVID and because, you know, we lost an entire season, you know, last summer, we're have already broached the subject, and we've gotten a couple of decent responses about sponsorships. So actually going out to either individuals or small business owners and asking, hey, you know, do you want a, and we haven't really determined if it's going to be on a, you know, your name on the back of a you know, a penny that's counts as like the uniform for the players, or is it going to be you know, removable signs that we can bring in out from the rec department to put around the courts, so people can kind of get a look at a, you know, a logo or a name, or just something to allow for some advertising. So we have actually thought back to you know, ways to actually bring in a little extra revenue that we maybe haven't done in the past.
And I know between CPC, I think your group too, I mean, there's a lot of talk about matching funding. So, you know, we originally got a CPC request about $48,000, and 9 of that went to replace the fence along Sawyer Street that was, I think, 40, 50 years old with the very sharp edges. So for this project here, about $39,000 from CPC, but $39,000 from the rec department and the basketball boosters. So it's sort of a matching, a nice match. I know CPC is big about matching funds, so we've done good there. We just, like I said, the issue really is just the when we say landscaping, it's just the trees. Just mostly just the trees. We want to put the high number at first. So.
Anybody have any further questions about the Sawyer Street courts? We move on to your next one. Ted?
So that's Milliken Field, which I don't know if we've actually come before you before on this one, because it's going on year 7. So this is a project.
We have heard a lot of different proposals on the Milliken Field. I'll call it shed, concession stand, or whatever you want to call it.
We've gone from build out to modular, back to build out, back to modular, back to build out, and now we're back to a modular unit. So this is our 6th attempt to try and do this. And the big issue is when we went out to bid with the build out, so it's close to $500,000-$600,000. So we went back to the modular unit. What we're trying to do here is just actually build handicap bathrooms at Milliken Field. Presently, I rent 2 porta potties every spring that stay there for 6 months for all the usage. And also, the Crossville Soccer Club runs a concession stand out there during their busy weekends. So, like we said, back I think 2014, we started looking at this, and we've had multiple versions. But basically, this is another. You guys have given us $25,000. I think 3 or 4 years ago, CPC gave us money towards this project. Part of that CPC project went to Milliken Field baseball directly. So there was a major reconstruction there about 3 years ago to make that field look the way it looks right now. So, but we've had this is another project that we've used recreation field money and put into an account. Crossville Soccer Club has committed $30,000 towards this project. So basically, from what we're down to, from what we have and what we're down to, we really just a short. The last quote for the modular unit was $229, and then IREA that would do the excavation was $46,000. And I don't know, Michelle. I know we last time we talked, you talked about doing a whole bid for the entire project. Do you know where that stands? Or?
So we're not bidding it until we know we have the funds, because that'll be bid number 8 that goes out. So if we do it correctly, we'll secure the funding and then we'll put it out to bid to make sure that we can carry through with the project. Because if we bid it now and we don't get the funding, or if it comes in higher, then we're back to square one.
Okay. So we had, I think what we were looking at is about a project cost of $298, and we have $213 presently. And then plus contingency, which, I have to check because I know I actually this Michelle. So I know Jason said 10%, Brian says 25. So I don't know if there's any discussion on which one.
So I believe the contingency should be 25,000, but something else we need to consider with this project, Ted, is the IREA piece is 46,000, but we also have to talk about the utilities. I know originally the 229 included getting volunteers essentially to kind of connect sewer and water. I think we need to bid it as a whole package. I just don't think we can rely on anyone, especially, with COVID and everything that's happened. It's going to be really difficult to go to someone who's lost a lot of their livelihood to say, hey, can you kick in and help us with this project? So I just think we want to be mindful of that. And then if in the end, if they do and are able to, commit their resources, then I think it's another story, but I don't think we should plan for that just because of, what's gone on over the past year.
And in our proposal, we estimated about 23,000 for the sewer, plumbing, heating, electrical. Not too sure where that would stand, but.
What, Ted, if it sounds like you're asking for funding on this for 113,000 for handicap bathrooms, right?
Or new building. So
that's the way I read the request. Okay.
Yes. It's a concession slash restroom,
Excuse me?
concession and restroom and storage, concession room. There's a concession stand, restroom and storage.
So it's more than handicap bathrooms.
Yes, yeah.
And it's the amount you then need in addition to the 219,000 you already have promised?
Yeah, we have about 214 right now.
Excuse me?
214, 214.
14.
Yep.
So the total project will come in at around 325 to 330. Is that correct?
That's what we estimated, but that was with a 10% contingency, so that might have to be, you know,
Is
we point out.
CPC, when you say the balance is from CPC, are they committed to that 214?
yes, we have 155 sitting in a CPC account, and then 25 sitting in a recreation account, and a $30,000 commitment from soccer. But there has been some money spent on
35 is where?
25 from, well, actually 25 from you guys. It's still sitting here. It's still sitting in account. 25 from the rec, and $30,000 from Cross Youth Soccer.
Okay.
But there was some money spent on engineering on a plan the plan previous to this that was deducted from that account. So it's about 214.
And this would be enough to do the whole project. Is that correct?
We hope so. Tim, do you want to comment?
Well, no, it's the issue. I think, Sam, has been just finding not so much the handicap bathrooms, but the whole idea of kind of redoing the shed which is falling down and being able to put something in there that will take everything into account: the storage that currently exists, the concession stand that currently exists, and the bathrooms that are now in porta potties that are kind of diagonally across from where the shed sits now. And the problem I think we found, and to answer your question directly, is will this take care of the project? We believe so, but it seems like every time that we've sort of mulled this over and had to go back for a new bid because I can't imagine spending $600,000 for a build out. Let's go the modular route, and then the prices change on the modular route, and suddenly we're sort of right back to where we were, kind of like Michelle says. And so, the answer is yes. We based upon what we know about the costs currently, yes, that would cover it.
And what happens if you don't get any funding from us?
Well, I guess the question would be, I mean, does it go, I know CPC, putting together a CPC proposal too, so I don't know if it could be capital CPC, if it's the same dollar amount or how that all works out.
Well, we have about $6 million of requests and about $3 million to spend. So we're not going to be able to do everything that everybody asks us to do, very simply. So my question is, what happens if we don't give you funding?
So I can answer this if you don't mind. So if we don't get funding to do what I keep referring to this as like the field house, every year that we push this off, the bids just keep increasing, or the dynamics change. Modular gets more expensive, the build out may be a little bit cheaper, but then excavating costs rise. So every year that this is pushed out, it just seems like it's driving the cost up, and we're still without that resource. And I know something that's been kicked around, and Ted, maybe you can talk about it a little bit, is with soccer funding a portion of this and then selling concessions. I think there's an idea that if those handicap accessible bathrooms are at the Milliken Field, then maybe that's a way to start some kind of partnership with tennis and baseball and everybody that uses that field for future operation and maintenance costs of that specific field house.
Yeah.
Oh, and I agree.
Understand, but you know, you're looking at a project where we haven't had anything really for, I don't know, the past 10 years. So it's an additional capability, and we have other projects which are, I don't know, I would call them presently critical. So you try to balance those things together. So
No, we are looking at different sources. We do have, obviously, we lost about $10,000 last spring because we couldn't, the youth soccer and youth lacrosse gives us money to use the fields. So we lost that last spring, but we'll have that this spring, hopefully. We also have been talking about, you know, the high school. I mean, one advantage to this will be that we won't be charging people, youth organizations, for porta potties.
yeah, I understand what you're saying, Ted.
We're trying.
Anybody else have, Michael, Dick, you have a question? Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I'm kind of stunned at the amount of money to construct a facility. There's no information on the size or a diagram or a drawing of what you're proposing. I know that the replacement cost for the home I live in is about the same amount of money that you're planning to spend on a concession stand with bathrooms. Is there sewage already there that you can connect to? Or is what part of the cost having to install waste pipes? That's one question I have. Certainly going to sound like, you know, an old grumpy guy, but when we first moved to town, there was nothing up there by way of porta potties or anything. And yes, there was a small shed built to store equipment so it wouldn't get ruined. So it just strikes me as something that might be certainly more than the town can afford, and maybe can be scaled to where you can get a funding request through, especially if you reach out to the other programs rather than leave it as sort of a perhaps they might. I would hope that you'd be going out actively now trying to line up support to say these other groups are willing to help defray the costs if we're going to get a facility that provides all of these benefits to the public. So I guess it's just a comment more than a question, but the cost of the building really has me unsure of whether to support this without seeing, you know, more information about what is it that you have in mind.
So Mike, I do have the previous bids and I'm happy to share them with you. I can load them on the OneDrive and you can take a look at them. I think that'll give you some good perspective as to why the costs are coming in so high. And I mean, the main difference between, you know, your own home and a public building is the prevailing wage. And that gets us every time. It's just prevailing wage is probably 3 times the cost than you would pay your contractor. But I will share those bids, and, you know, it's probably great for the whole committee to see the bids and see how they're coming in, and we can share the most recent bid. We can share the past few bids so that you can just kind of see the anomalies and all the differences in the different types of projects.
Can this project be scaled down? Can you drop the concession stand, for example? It's a nice to have, but not essential for supporting the programs.
Actually, Mike, the concession stand does support the soccer program. That's how the boosters get all their money, along with the, you know, the fees for the kids to play. It's a very highly used field for soccer. I don't know if you've been by there on a Saturday, but there are people up there all day long playing.
Yep.
And I don't think that's going to get lessened. Soccer is becoming more and more popular in this town.
I agree. I agree with that.
Now, I do remember, Michelle, the original bid being higher than this by quite a lot. And that was the build it from scratch. And the benefit of the modular building for the prevailing wages is that they're not built here, they're built in the factory, right? So you're not paying the prevailing wage for the construction of the modular building, but you are for the installation. Is that right?
Yes,
To
you are correct.
to answer the sewer question, Mike, when they did the sewer up on Bancroft Road, they actually actually broke off I'm gonna call it a sprout, just sort of a pipe that heads towards the building. So we got, the plan was always hopefully to have bathrooms up there in place of porta potties, because they're not handicap accessible. So that's one of the issues that we have, is that we don't have a handicap facilities up there.
Okay, thank you.
Any more, yes, Ralph?
Well, I guess the question is, what do the porta potties cost you? And then second, how much is offset by user fees, I guess is the question, Ted.
I think I just switched companies last year, a little cheap, another local company that was a little less expensive. So it's about $200 a month I pay for the ones up there. And I do charge, it's part of the fee that we charge. Not only does soccer and lacrosse pay us a per head fee, but they also pay us a partial payment for the porta potties, and the high school pays us for porta potty use in the spring and the fall also.
Okay. So the cost benefit ratio is not going to be terrific for a $300,000 project versus $200 a month. So the math does not work well, as you'll probably fully understand.
No, I agree. But like handicap wise, it's the issue that we just can't. We don't have handicap units up there, and
right.
We really can't, because where we locate them now is not accessible to get to. So.
Okay, well, you understand some of the hesitation here as you can fully, okay, right.
Any other questions for Ted on Milliken Field?
Just a quick question with regards to the site work being done by IREA. What exactly is that for, if it does not include the sewer or the water or electrical hookups?
Michelle, do you have I think I sent you that estimate that Jason got us. I don't know if that was in the pack, all the information I sent you Friday. I know I sent you a bunch. Tim, do you have that email in front of you?
You can give me 1 second, I'll be able to.
I have a question while you're looking at that, Michelle. I don't know the answer. I don't know if anyone on this meeting knows the answer to, but the snack shack at the baseball field here on North Main Street, how was that funded?
Little League.
The Little League. Oh, the Little League. Okay.
I'm pretty sure, just totally with the Little League.
I think it was.
So they didn't come.
I had heard that it was a private, like a family in town was the majority of the money, but I don't know exactly who that was.
Oh, okay.
It might have been part of that big project when they built the 2 new fields down below. So Michelle, I think that IREA was just for a basic excavation in the cement slab, I think maybe.
That sounds about right. I'm trying to pull up the estimate. It's just
Yeah, I
different.
found the quote here from this is from October 19th. So for the $46,000, the itemized, well, it's not itemized, but the items that are covered by this $46,000. Let's see, demo existing building, excavate for water and sewer to area of new building, remove organic material and grade for new building, provide processed material to achieve grades, prep for and supply concrete, and then backfill loam and seed.
Okay, so the first line or two, you mentioned that they are going to excavate for water and sewer hookups.
That's right. That's part of the quote here. Yep.
Okay, so you literally just need someone to put the pipe in the trench that they're gonna dig and then that they're gonna fill and level.
Correct.
Okay. That shouldn't be huge money. The biggest part of a you know, a sewer line connection is just getting a really expensive piece of equipment, you know, onto the site and digging the trench for the most part, and dealing with ledge, but.
You know, an interesting thing sort of occurs to me as I list all these numbers coming in. We probably need to get somebody out of the Cape or somewhere else to quote on these jobs. I think they found Cohasset to be a wonderful place to actually quote very high prices for very little work. But anyway, it feels like it. But anyhow, we need some other people wanting to quote and are interesting. Maybe out of New Bedford or Fall River or somewhere, but not here. Anyway, this is getting ridiculous.
The price definitely goes up as you come closer to 02025, and especially when you see the ocean.
Do we have any more questions on the Milliken Fieldhouse?
Yes, Sam. Can we get some kind of a drawing or elevation just to give us a sense of what it is you're proposing?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's one available. We had one several, I don't know if it was 2, 3, 4 years ago.
I'll load the latest plan, so you'll have access.
Can you stick it up on OneDrive?
Sure thing.
Okay.
And Michelle, just send out a heads up that it's there. Just let
Sure.
me know.
Yep, I'll share the link with you.
Thank you.
And Michelle, just in terms of the bids, when you say the plan, are we basically sending the plan out to a bunch of modular manufacturing companies and telling them to build what we've designed? Or are we going through their catalog of, you know, 200 buildings that they already have spec'd, including these, and buying the one that suits our needs?
I can't answer that. That is something that Jason was working on, but I can certainly find out the answer and let you know in the morning.
Okay, because certainly we are not the first town that has built a concession stand with a storage shed and a handicap bathroom.
Right.
And we certainly don't need to hire an architect to draw one for us.
The only other thing I would ask, Ted, is are there handicapped bathrooms as other porta potty handicapped bathrooms? There
A
are.
little more expensive, but there are, yep.
Okay.
Any other
You
questions?
mentioned that just on the question of handicap porta potties, Ted, you mentioned that where you've cited the porta potties is not accessible for handicapped people. Can you find a better spot? I mean, it seems
Unfortunately,
like,
I'm sorry, the best spot is actually right by that, where the shed is now, because the
Yeah.
handicap parking spots are there. The handicap gate is there, and it's the flattest area. So that would be the spot where the shed, where the present shed is now, either to the left or the right, but they'd be very, you know, right now we put them along the baseball line, along Bearcroft Way, just to keep the neighbors happy. But you know, this, to put 2 handicap toilets would be right at the gate, right when you walk in. So,
I appreciate that you need to keep the neighbors happy, but you also have an obligation to provide facilities for handicapped people.
I agree.
And it just seems like a very easy decision to put them where they have to go.
Do you know how many bathrooms we're proposing be in the structure?
Michelle, I think there's 4, if I remember correctly, or 3. I mean, they're all unisex. There's not 2. I think it's either 3 or 4. I don't know. Tim, do you remember seeing that?
I do not recall that.
Yeah.
I believe it's at least 4.
Yeah, that seems like a lot to me, but
Well, the one thing we need to worry about too is the capacity, especially with youth soccer's going on, because there is a number that, you know, if somebody ever called us on it, based on 600 people in the field, 4 is really not enough either. But obviously they're not all used all the time, but
And Ted, I know we've mentioned it in the past, but obviously when you have your own facility, you now have a maintenance issue. When you have porta potties, hopefully the vendor has the issues, but I don't know if I'm right on that thought, but you have a continuing long-term maintenance issue associated with actually owning the facility and being a part of the towns. So there are a lot of issues here. So
Oh, my recommendation, and I'll have to check with Chris on this, is that the soccer club will be raising revenue in the shed. They always upkept the shed, kept it, until recently, but the fees they collect from selling hot dogs, they'll be responsible for the upkeep of the building, including the bathrooms. And the bathrooms will be locked in a way that people couldn't use them at the middle of the night. I think that's one of the neighbors' concern was that people would be pulling off the middle of the street just to use the bathrooms, but they'll be locked in a way that they only can be accessed when games are being played.
Any other questions on this?
I don't have a question, but I think the proposal is on the OneDrive. It's got a funny name. It's 2020 0811 94429 Cohasset, Mass submittal. Doesn't say anything about shed. It's under rec. It's 108 pages long, and there's drawings. It's 4 bathrooms.
Rec, which year? This year?
It says it was uploaded 3 days ago, so.
Excuse me, Susan?
It says uploaded 3 days ago. It's from August of 2020.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, I just, Sam, I'm digesting this, CPC versus capital budget, and, the overwhelming majority of the stuff that we see cannot be funded by CPC, right? It just feels to me that given the crunch that we're facing, that anything that can be funded should be funded by CPC, and we should have an answer to that before we vote on this.
Yeah, it would be nice. So if you could approach CPC, you may want to approach them on several of these.
I did the presentation. I don't know if Michelle downloaded the presentation I gave to them back in December, but there is a presentation I sent to them. I did meet with them December 7th as a preliminary, and I talked to Russ last week on filling out forms for all 3 projects. So we'll be on the agenda for them the next week or 2, or probably 2 weeks.
Okay, and just just an observation when you meet with them, the concept of partnering with us is wonderful in concept when we have money. We're really, I think, scratching our heads trying to figure out how to actually make it work over the next couple of years.
Well, let's move on to Beechwood unless anybody has any more on Milliken. Okay, what do we got for Beechwood, Ted?
So Beechwood just
70,000.
Yeah, well, a lot of it's contingency. So, Beechwood actually hasn't been. 2007 was when the project was done. That whole baseball field, playground. So it's heavily used. It was heavily used during COVID. So we, definitely need to. What happened was they put 2 or 3 trees too close to the court, and Brian Joyce had a good analogy. I don't know if you remember that when you're driving by our red benches heading towards Town Hall, there's a giant tree in front of you that's about 6 or 7 feet wide. And that's a tree that they put right next to the fence at, Beechwood. If it'll be 100 years from now, but there'll be no, take up the entire court. But so it was causing damage to the court, cracks that were, becoming a hazard for people. So they took down, I think there was 1 taken down previously, but there's 2 that were taken down recently. So we still have the crack repair, but then we just, if the money's available, that court, the surfacing is gone. Obviously we'd want to, tear the court up and then, re-asphalt it, repaint it. There was a great suggestion was one of the problems with that court is you can't sit and watch. Teams can't sit there on the court and sub in and out. There's no team bench spot area for team benches. So one of our board members thought of a great idea, opening up the fence towards the outfield. So that way people can sit safely on the grass and also, let people play. But there's 2, so we have a little estimate there for the, to remove the fence area. It's not that bad, but we've had a couple issues with the electrical box right there. We have a neighbor that likes to break into it to shut the lights off, and then we have the kids that like to break into it to turn the lights on. So they've done some serious damage to that whole panel in there. So, one of the things that we met there, that thing in the fall with Tim and I and electrical and the maintenance department, about just moving that whole box. So it was secure. Nobody could break into it. But basically the project cost, I have, done the numbers a little bit more, because IREA quoted us a price, but then New England Seal Coat quoted a price for digging it up and actually putting the court back together and recertain and putting the court lines down. And that was a little cheap, less expensive. So the number I have right now is like 65, 66, and not 70, and that's with the contingency. But I'll let Tim talk about, he's a Beechwood neighbor, so he can explain a little bit about how much usage and how popular that court is.
It's a very popular court, and I think as we were talking about Sawyer Street, as I mentioned prior or previously, the youth, let's call it grades 4 through say 12, they would probably spend most of their time down at the Sawyer Street courts, where we would then leave the rest of the basketball playing public to use Beechwood. And it's gotten quite a bit of use, well, really over the last 14 years. It's going to be 14 years in September. And like Ted says, the surface is really kind of washed out now, to the point where it can actually be dangerous with the slickness of the court, depending upon the weather and depending upon if it's previously rained or just rained. Any improvement on the court would be greatly appreciated. I'm sure I know by the neighborhood, and probably by at least 2/3 of the college age kids that have been home for quite a while now, and before the rims came down, spent many hours playing over at Beechwood. So it does get a lot of use. This project here, it solves that problem, and then it also solves an idea that has been kind of kicked around. It sort of got the court got kind of shoehorned in the entire project that took place back in 2007. So it's very, very narrow on the sidelines. There's a little bit of room on the baselines, but not so much on the sidelines, and that can also be dangerous. It hasn't been yet in terms of kids going out of bounds and kind of smashing into other kids and what have you. But we've been lucky on that regard. But opening it up with the fence facing the center field of the baseball field, kind of opening up that fence there, would allow for team benches and kind of a little bit of just a little bit of breathing room in there for whoever's going to use it, whether it be if we're going to have 3 youth games going on a particular night and we need to use Beechwood for one of the nights, or if it's going to be older kids playing and having a spot to sit and put their stuff.
Have you had any thoughts of what you might do with the beautification committees that would want to plant more trees right next to the fence? And how to prevent that so it doesn't destroy your court again if this gets redone?
Obviously the trees that we can't, where they were presently, we can't do because it's just too close to the court. I think it was only, Tim, if I correctly right, it's only about less than a foot and a half away from the court, the fence.
Yeah.
We'd love to. We've talked about beautification. I don't know if anyone's driven by there lately, but CYSBA just actually redid the entire infield, on their cost. They're one of the primary users for the field. So they did a beautiful job this fall on their own. They donated all the expenses and had it all paid for. So Beechwood, since it's the first repair to that infield since 2007. So it ties in nicely that, I think it cost them about $10,000 to repair the infield, but they did an incredible job. So we're actually working our way to making that place look a lot better, and between the court and the baseball field. So
if you could you prioritize these 3 requests from most number 1, number 2, number 3?
I probably defer to my vice chairman, but I think it's in the order that we presented tonight. Obviously, we need to get, well, Sawyer Street's gonna happen. I mean, Sawyer Street's, we had the money to put the backboards up. We have the money to put lines down. You know, so we have to get the court up and running by the spring we have. So Tim, I don't know if you want to,
No, I'd agree. I think that's the proper order. You know,
Could you repeat the order again?
I'd say it would go like this. I'd say it would go Sawyer Street, Milliken, Beechwood.
Okay,
You know, but again, the main reason for the Milliken is, you know, we're going on 6 years of,
yeah, I understand that.
so that's why that one slides into number 2.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions on Beechwood? Yes, Ralph.
Yeah, Ted, I looked through, you have a whole series of quotes, actually, like there are almost three quotes associated with actually doing something on the Beechwood court. One of which is really to fix the area where the crack is. The crack seems to be running from roughly from Beechwood Street, kind of north toward the infield of the baseball field. That's kind of where it is. And one of the quotes was reasonable to fill the crack, resurface, and do the whole thing. And I don't remember the number, but it was the lowest of the 3 numbers I had looked at that I think is on the website. Do you remember what those numbers are? And is it a possibility to try to do something that actually would work on the short term and would allow us to actually allow it to happen, but also keep our budget within reason here?
I think that that was, sorry, that was IREA's quote. They had it broken down by 2 ways. 19 for crack repair, there was 19,000, and 36 and 35 and change for the total resurface. So yeah, you're right. It was 19 to fix the cracks. There is a new crack that, you know, that has formed that's going towards the backstop to one, you know, from, I want to say the 3A side that wasn't there when we took the trees down. The trees are 2 spots, one towards center field, one towards the, you know, the cemetery. But you know, Tim, if you want to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've noticed a new crack heading towards the backboard that's facing 3A.
Yeah, I think that was the main worry with going with option 1 was that it would be great if it was a, you know, kind of like a Band-Aid that would take care of what we currently see. But what would happen if we're now 3 years from now, we've got a similar situation, and do we keep you know, papering over the issues until we're left with, you know, no other choice? I think that was kind of one of our thought processes was, all right, well, if it's a reasonable quote, if we can get this done reasonably, can we do the whole thing and not have to worry about having to come back in a year or 2 years or whatever it might be?
And was there anybody else who quoted on that, or are we stuck with IREA, whose prices seem to be rather extraordinary?
But we did get that the price that and the quotes in the, I think in the OneDrive for you guys. We have a quote from New England Seal Coat, and they were 31,000 instead of 35 to pulverize the court, and then $5,500 to resurface it, you know, put the lines down, everything like that. So
Okay.
that's when I had there's 2 quotes in there. You know, I had 36 plus a company to repaint for 6, but New England Seal Coat gave us a quote for doing the excavation, pulverizing it, giving us a clean surface, and also lining the court and coloring it. So that was $36,500. So it does save us about $6,000 by going, you know, we did get a second quote. The other issue too is that, and you know, Tim will attest to this, we do have some puddle areas there that don't dry. You know, Sawyer Street's been great. You know, after a rainstorm, we can play there. But Beechwood does have some pockets all over the court. Yeah, I think, is that right, Tim?
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was saying too about the how it can be slick and dangerous after a rain. It does have these, you know, there are little depressions, you know, and I'm not an engineer and I don't know the exact terminology for it, but it's, you know, it seems like certain areas have settled or certain areas have kind of gotten worn down over time, and the water tends to collect there. And, you know, so that I think was, you know, the whole idea was if we can solve all of our problems in one fell swoop at a reasonable price, then that would probably be preferable to, you know, to kind of patchwork solutions.
Would you consider going out to another vendor and seeing if there's somebody who's a little, who traditionally is not charging quite the same numbers that people like IREA are, other than New England Seal Code?
Sure, yeah, we could do
I
that.
mean, just see if there isn't somebody out there who's a little bit further from, the vendors who seem to want to, do Hingham and Hull principally and make all their money off of us. So anyway, I'm just trying to say it seems like a lot of dough. That's all.
Sure. I think, Michelle, is there a list from the state that we could be on those two?
I appreciate that.
I know there's one tennis court company that would be interested, but all they're pushing is concrete right now, which is not the best surface for basketball courts. It's very tough on the knees. So,
Oh, no, I agree. I understand that. Right.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I do have one, Sam.
Yeah, okay, Francine.
Really to I think further Ralph's point in that, I think what you had asked for was $70,000. And so the quotes we were just looking at, the difference between those two, is that what you suggested, removing the back fence and opening it up?
yeah, so we have two quotes for the, resurfacing, repainting the court. Obviously when we do that, we need new backboards. But then the fence area, the actual fence job is $2,000 to remove the area to allow sitting on the upper court is $2,000. And the electrical, the cost to change the electrical and put it in a safer, more secure location is $6,800.
Got it, Francine?
So I had a question as well, Sam.
Yeah, I'm just not reconciling the number, but
I can run it down. So
Thank
I
you.
just did so I'm basing it off New England Seal Code because they were pulverizing the court and resurfacing for 36.5.
Yep.
And then 6,000 for backboards. Well, actually, I'm sorry, 7,301. Right. What I did, the company that's installing the backboards at Sawyer Street, that was 2 courts. I cut it in half.
okay.
So 7,301 for the backboards, 2,000 for the fence, and $6,800 for the electrical part of the project. For me, that came to 52,600
That sounds right.
with a contingency fee of 25% of 13,000, which hopefully we don't need. So
I see. Thank you.
Does that help? Close?
It did. Yep.
Okay. Brian, did you have another question?
Yeah, I have a question just with regards to making sure that whatever we do has longevity. I recall this conversation a year or so ago, and I specifically recall a concern about that field and surrounding area being somewhat squishy, and oftentimes wet, and that that was likely contributing to the cracking phenomenon that you're experiencing both in the past and this new crack that has formed that's not in any way related to the tree. So my question specifically is, how long did the court last, the last court, okay? And do we know what's underneath it? And does anyone that's bid on this project actually intend to make sure that the sub base is sufficient to make sure that we get full expected lifetime out of a new court if we pay them to resurface it? Because, if you resurface over mud, it's just going to crack again.
Well, so Ralph, some of you guys might remember there was never a basketball court there. There used to be a fire station. So it did replace the area that the fire station used to be at. And then regarding drainage, and like I said, Tim was a part of the crew. We've tried for a few winters to put a hockey rink there, and we've had a couple of leaks, but all the water goes right to the playground. It really doesn't drain in that direction. And we talked to CYSBA and the DPW about trying to build that. We do have a wet spot in center field, but it drains towards the playground, because when we did have when the rink burst, it all filled the playground. So it does go in a different direction. Tim, does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that's right. That's the direction it flows. Yeah.
Okay. How long did the current court last, the existing court last?
That was built in 2007.
15 years.
And I think one of the issues that we have with the new crack at the backboard could be the backboard. We see that at the tennis courts. A lot of cracking happens at the poles. So
Any other questions? We're not going to vote on this tonight, Ted. We have to wait till we're through everything, so.
Okay.
Which will probably be, we're still waiting on the schools to get back to us on some stuff.
Okay.
I thank you very much for taking the time to go through all this with us.
like I said, filling out forms for CPC. So I think Russ mentioned February vacation week, or actually maybe that's too soon, but I'll be meeting with CPC probably in 2 weeks.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions of Rec? I'm going to change the subject back to what we did last week on the skid steer, because I think we've gotten the questions we had answered, and want to see if anybody on capital budget has any more questions on the skid steer.
None here, and the email that came out with the explanation was very helpful.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions on it?
The only
Yes,
thing I'd mention, I thought it was nice to hear that. I felt that the hours were good, to be honest with you. It's nice to know it could actually load the snow. I wasn't sure whether the bucket actually would work, because it didn't look as though that was a bucket that would actually work for that purpose, but that's another story. The only other thing it struck me was that one of the reasons why, was it Pembroke from whom we're buying it? Is that where it is? Okay. The only thing that struck me was what I did know about skid steerers. You cannot use that in a field, because it is a skid steerer, where in order to turn it, you keep 2 sets of wheels on one side fixed and the other 2 are moved. And therefore you tear up anything that you actually run it on other than pavement. So it is a limited type device. There's no doubt about it. And you wouldn't actually go and, let's say you wanted to take out the roots of a tree in the middle of the common, it would be a lousy machine to use. You just tear it up, you know. So there's some real limitations on that machine, but the price was good, and the age was good, I guess, all of those things. So, but anyway, be aware of how limited this device really is.
And we'd save money on not renting a Bobcat.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
that's
the Bobcat was more versatile, way more versatile. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have no objection. I think it was a good deal. So, yeah.
Do we want to, anybody want to propose a motion?
Yeah, I don't have the number in front of me, so if
I
someone
think
can
it's
help me with that.
12,500.
Right. So I move that capital budget approve or agree to the purchase of used skid steer from Town of Pembroke for $12,500 for DPW.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, and I'll just do a roll call. Susan Franklin?
Aye.
Aye. Ralph?
Aye.
Francine?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Sam? Aye. And Michael?
Aye.
I assume you're aye. Thank you all. That's very helpful.
Yep.
I know the next item on the agenda is a discussion of town and IT. I just had 2 things I wanted to mention. One is Alternative Energy is having a meeting on the 11th at 7:30, and on the agenda are a bunch of electric purchases, I guess is the best way to put it, buses included. So it might be worthwhile for us, members of the capital budget, to listen in on their meeting. I know they'd like it, but we would certainly gain some information about this that we might not otherwise get. Michelle, did you have something to say about it?
I just think it'd be wonderful is if you could attend the meeting, because they are having someone from Highland Electric present on the electric school buses. And I think the more people that can listen to their presentation and formulate some questions will help us make a decision. And Ellen, I know you're just listening in, but I mean, we would love for you to be there as well. I think the more participants we have and the more buy-in we get, the better off we'll all be.
Okay, thank you. The other item I had, and I'm in the process of trying to figure this out a little bit more. Brian, you were very helpful, was overall funding going forward. If you tried to add town hall into non-excluded debt, it quickly blows the capital stabilization fund budget up and doesn't leave any money for any other items in town going forward. So I'm in the process of talking with Don Piot to get some more definitive information and also a better projection of what items might be coming down the pike, because he had a number of things on there that didn't include some others that we should have had. You know, he didn't have the salt shed, he didn't have the middle high school HVAC. So there'll be more on this later in the month of February, but I just wanted to alert you to where I was on it. Anybody have any sort of questions about it? Okay, I'm going to open it up to a discussion of town school IT. Michael, you wanted to get into this.
It's a very simple question. I'm not looking to make a big deal out of this, but we asked Ron Menard to help us understand the current budget proposals for annual town meeting from IT. And he directed us to speak to the schools for the school IT budget. And that struck me as kind of bifurcated. I felt and still feel that IT questions should be coming through the IT department. But that question of who from our liaison groups, people, should be questioning the school IT budget, and where is the crossover to the town IT budget? So that's really, that's where I'm coming from. How should we manage this as a capital budget committee? Should the two school liaisons include IT considerations when they're looking at the overall school department request? Or should we look to the IT department to be able to advocate for the school on their requests? Or one other option would be for the IT liaison, who happens to be me, take on the school IT request and keep it all aligned as, you know, IT research, IT discovery on what's behind the requests and how does it all tie together for the town's technology needs.
Well, I'll give you what my opinion is, but I want to hear from everybody else too. I think we will get into a difficult decision or a difficult situation if we don't have a consistent liaison to IT, including the schools. I don't want to say I don't trust the schools, but I think we have to make sure that whatever the schools do IT-wise is workable within the overall town IT framework. And if it's not, is it going to require some major changes and or expenditures in the overall town program?
Exactly.
So, you know, whether we want a group of 4 of us to tackle this, or whether we want to just go with the school IT or the town IT, which I think makes it more cumbersome. I think it'd be simpler if we just had 2 representatives IT and they dealt with the whole thing. That's my opinion. But I'm willing to listen to anybody else.
Here are a few thoughts. I've got a few thoughts, Sam. First, if the school and the town want to bifurcate to some extent different parts of the IT decisions, I think that places an even greater onus on us to make sure that we do not bifurcate our review of the collective IT requests. Because, you know, if we have different people looking at the school IT requests than looking at the town IT requests, you know, we as a committee will not necessarily sort of have a clear view into both buckets. I mean, I really think the same people have to be looking at both buckets in order to,
Okay.
you know, to be able to formulate and present to the rest of the committee an aggregate picture. The second comment I would make is that 100% of the IT that exists in our town today exists as a result of the digital learning exercise that took place back in 2016 and 2017, you know, when, you know, we unfortunately were put in the awkward position of having to turn down a request for Apple MacBook Pros for an entire grade of kids, you know, frankly, because there was no network, there was no IT team that was capable of building or running a network. And there was no real plan to actually integrate the technology into the learning curriculum. And so, you know, we took the heat on that, but a lot of people did a lot of really good work. And, you know, after that work was done, we spent money to build a town-wide fiber network. We've got 2 data centers, neither one of which actually one of them's in the school. So one of them's in the school, one of them is not. The school buildings are connected to the same fiber network as all the other town buildings. And they're by far the biggest user in terms of applications and users, but they're not the only user on that network. So I think it's, or in those data centers. And certainly what they're doing affects the security of our IT infrastructure town-wide because, you know, they're on the same network. So, you know, they can't just be off, you know, making decisions on new firewalls at those buildings without paying attention to the firewalls that are deployed throughout the rest of the town. So, you know, I appreciate that, you know, Chris and Dr. Sullivan, you know, reached a deal on this, but, you know, Chris and Dr. Sullivan aren't the guys that have to make it work. It's, you know, it's Ron and the IT staff up at the school. So I do think that there's more to this than just an MOU, which is really just a spirit of agreement when it comes right down to it. I mean, the devil's in the details, and you know, we really need to stay on top of this and make sure that it's cohesive. And if it works the way they've written it, that's wonderful. If it doesn't work the way they've written it, you know, and it really starts to go awry, we're the ones that are going to get stuck holding the ball and spending money to fix it. So I trust and hope that it's headed in the right direction, but we have to watch this really closely.
So you're in favor of the same people?
I think the same people have to look at all the IT requests. I don't care where they come from. And it might make sense to have, you know, one of the school liaisons, you know, on that IT group, you know, also looking at, you know, the town's IT requests. I mean, just thinking out loud, I mean.
Yeah, I understand. Ralph, you had,
Well, a few things that strike me about all of this. As you know, I tried to, through a thread, which I actually sent basically only to Michael Dick with copies to the Capital Budget Committee and I think Michelle. And the purpose of what I did was to explain, in fact, how does industry actually make the definitions between what is hardware, what is what is called operating system software and applications. And it was a textbook example of what, in fact, how those very questions are addressed by people who develop product for the internet. Since I did this for most of my life and I managed a very large group of people who did everything from Ethernet to routers to switches to hubs to so on, and billions of dollars of business in that field, it is the textbook example which defines very clearly so that the interface between each of the kinds of work that are done is clear. And it is very clear in those models, irrespective of the way the school committee looks at it. That is not important. It's how we want to look at it as liaisons. Is you're usually very clear that applications, for example, the kinds of things that the schools do, ride on top of what the IT department and Ron Menard does. And there's an interface between the two of them, which is clear, which is usually how much speed do you want and what kinds of applications are you riding on top of? And those definitions are essential in order to have a cooperative agreement between the two. The school can choose to do it as they wish. That isn't important to me, but how we deal with it, I think, is the important question. I do think IT as conceived as hardware and operating system software, which is what Ron does, and what the schools do are very different things. And that, in fact, the way the school has divided it out is not inappropriate. I think it's quite appropriate, and it does very much follow what's called the TCP/IP model. So I'm more inclined to say, where it's IT and you're talking about speeds and feeds, you have two people working with Ron Menard. If you're talking about applications that the schools are going to use, which will be very expensive, then I think you're talking to the schools. So that's what that's how I looked at it. Now that's a very technical way to look at it, but I do think it's essentially correct. In fact, that is in fact how all of industry now looks at it. There's no question about that, and it is textbook stuff. The second thing I will tell you is something that really struck me and I'll bring you an example of what I found extremely objectionable about one of the responses you got, Sam. You may recall, all of you, that in a town meeting, the town moderator says you do not use personalities, you talk about facts. Unfortunately, in that thread from one individual, they decided they were going to use names, something that in fact we should not do, and something that is poisonous with regard to relationships between people. I think that is not acceptable to me, and I think it should not be acceptable to anybody. If anyone wants to debate the actual facts, let's debate the facts. If you don't want to debate the facts, don't start introducing personalities. So sorry about that, but those are the way I feel about this.
okay, well, do you think that, I guess your feeling, if I'm reading you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you can have two different groups of people, one on the schools and one on the town from this IT perspective?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. That would be the normal way to do this. Yeah, right.
Okay.
You would separate out those functions very clearly, and it works that way in industry right now.
What happens though, if I just play devil's advocate for a minute, what happens when the school goes beyond asking for things like applications, and it becomes a little more gray, where we would say that really is a hardware, software request from the schools, and that belongs in Ron's bucket. And then we're left arguing with where it really belongs, if we're willing to go along that line.
I guess you need a specific example of that. For Ron, it would tend to be VMware or the operating system software. But, you know, when you go above that and you say this is an application that is associated with learning, for example, it is clearly within the school's purview to actually make that decision.
Right.
There may be a gray area. Someone would have to tell me where that gray area is, and I would tell you what I think, and I could be wrong. But I'm not sure that there isn't such a very clear distinction in the TCP/IP model that really tells you that. If you go into it very deeply, it will be very explicit about those things, because it's the interface between that application and also the implementation at the hardware level that you're really talking about. Then there's a real implementation strategy, right?
Can I just comment on Ralph's last statement? There is a dimension that is driven by the schools that must be ruled upon by the town, and that is capacity. And by that I mean, if the school comes up with some sort of digital learning that overtaxes the capacity of our networks, if we've got a very large number of end users all logging in at the same time into an application that uses a lot of bandwidth all at once, that's something that is the concern of the town's IT department. So
I completely agree with you, Mike. That's right.
I agree with what you're saying in terms of, all right, the school wants to do some sort of curriculum that depends on these tools. Fine. As an IT liaison, it's transparent to me. I'm agnostic on what those tools are, what that learning curriculum is. I leave that to the school liaisons to decide whether that's an appropriate spend. But where we have to assess the impact to our infrastructure, not only current state, but future state, that's definitely something that Ron should be advocating for, or have reviewed and is comfortable and can convince us that, yeah, this is a good use of our infrastructure and our bandwidth that we have.
Yeah, I think the way that works usually is that the schools define what they need and the capacity, or at least the number of people who are going to be on the system, and what the needs of the software are. They have to hand that off to Ron. Ron has to decide whether or not he's got the capacity. So, and at that point, Ron, you're talking with the IT department about whether or not he's going to add that capacity, but also some of that is it's exactly what it's all about. And then the second is, if he doesn't, and we can't afford that capacity, then it has to go back up to the schools to actually say, what can we cut back in the way of requirements
Exactly.
here. So that's exactly how it works. It's a hand up and hand down until you get that figured out. So there is an interface there without any question. So I agree with that.
Well, but our question is, how do we in capital budget best deal with that? Is it having the same two people in IT in the schools, or can we split it off into two different sort of groups? And I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is.
No, I'm not sure I know either. I do think the IT department is broader than the schools. So the IT stands alone in many ways because you've got applications going on in finance and other places in the town. So you really need to have that IT capable of supporting all of the potential applications, whatever they are. But the schools are a unique case because they stand alone in this case, and therefore have the ability to actually make more demands on the system than in fact it's capable of supporting. So you probably need somebody who's going to be looking at the schools at the same time and then talking with Ron. So maybe it's a combined thing, but whatever, there's definitely an interaction between the two. So I totally agree with that.
Before I make another comment, does anyone else have any thoughts? Susan or Michelle? Susan, can't hear you.
Doesn't seem so, Michael. Go ahead.
All right. Susan, were you going to say something?
I was just gonna say that I appreciated the detail that Ralph went into, and I think that it does make sense that you have the IT infrastructure people separate from the school apps people for the way that they operate out there. And honestly, they can bring to the table any application they want, but if it's not going to ride on the network, then that's gonna get shot down by IT. And they're gonna have to go back, to the drawing board anyway.
Well, maybe that's a good point, Susan. What you guys were saying is that it be a requirement of, that we make that a requirement at the school level, that they've already, vetted this with Ron, what conversations have they had, that they provide some proof of how they've worked through, asking for this or what it means, and that they've already done that, so that we're not doing it for them. We shouldn't be telling them this is what you ought to be doing. They ought to be doing that anyway, but we ought to make it a requirement that they're vetting this with Ron.
I'm just going to throw out a potential scenario that may or may not be real, but I'm trying to heighten a point. Let's say the schools go out and put some applications in that all of a sudden use up all the town's bandwidth, and we don't have any capability to really support it, and it starts interfering with the regular operation of the whole school, the whole town IT infrastructure. And we get an emergency request for funding to correct this. We've got to do who knows what, ABC. But it has to be done tomorrow because nobody's thought this through well enough. They've obviously done something they haven't cleared with Ron, but it could be likely to happen if they go off on their own. And I want to try to make sure we're not faced with something like that. That's the best, simplest thing I can say.
That's a very good example.
Sam, is it fair to say that your sensitivity is coming from the fact that we've been in those situations in the past?
What?
Is it fair to say that your sensitivity to that hypothetical situation is because we've faced those situations in the past?
Well, I don't know.
Not picking on the school at all, right? Just broadly speaking, we
Yeah, I'm making something up that has
Right.
maybe no basis in fact, but I'm trying to make a point that
right.
if they're not communicating with each other, and by the time we find out they're not, we've created a crisis, say in the middle of with 1 day to go before the start of school, and all of a sudden this application can't work, but we have to have it, and we need X amount of funding to fix the problem. When it probably could have been avoided, and the amount of funding we needed maybe would have been minuscule.
The concern is this
I
memorandum of
struggle.
understanding. I'm sorry.
What?
No,
One
go ahead.
at a time. Go ahead, Francine.
Sorry. I guess I'm struggling with the fact that we would be faced with that situation. It suggests that they're not, in that example, that the person responsible at this on the schools is not doing their proper due diligence. And maybe you're saying that's happened before, but I guess it scares me to think that that's what could happen, that they're not doing, they're not doing their proper due diligence, and just, not cowboys necessarily, but that's what comes to mind.
To just be completely clear, my comment was not directed to the schools. I just feel like we have seen many, many situations here at Capital Budget where people have not done their due diligence. We see them over and over and over again.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. Michael, I don't know if you wanted to say something?
Yes, I wanted to point to this memorandum of understanding and Ron Menard's answer to our question about who should be weighing in on school IT requests. And Ron's answer seem to indicate, well, it's not my department, it's the school. You'll have to set up time with the school IT director to work that out. I'm just not happy with that. I think the responsibility has to rest with the town IT department, and this has already been mentioned in this conversation, for anything that falls within their purview. And this memorandum of understanding may have some real benefit in day-to-day operations, terrific. But when it comes to making requests, capital requests, I think we have to be clear that we really are looking for school or town needs must come through the IT director and through the town manager ultimately.
Well, I would agree with you, Ralph.
Okay. What happens usually if there's an application proposed by some vendor to the schools? There will be also a specific set of requirements, they call them requirements or something similar, about what kind of capacity do you need for the number of students you expect to have on the system simultaneously. In other words, there will be a technical person, presumably at the vendor level, who can say, this is the capacity you're going to need. This is the gigabits of information you're going to have to store. This is the gigabits of information or terabits of information you're going to have flowing on a continuous basis. In other words, there'd be a definition. So the first thing is, once they actually have an application, you got to ask the vendor what in fact is the demand on the system. That gets passed down to IT, and IT says, I can do this with my current system or I can't. So, I mean, these things are not, it's not rocket science about how this is all sorted out. But based on that, there is an interaction there where the person asking for the application has to be able to communicate with the IT department what the requirements are on the IT infrastructure. I mean, that's the way it works. And that means there is cooperation in the schools, no question about it. How we organize is a completely different question, because our organization is really about, what are we going to fund the IT? And if IT says, cheekers, that I got to go with another 10 terabits of capability in the system, then you understand what's happening, right? And then you have a way to deal with it. On the application level, we have almost no say whatsoever at the schools. They need to actually figure out what applications they need for the benefit of the students, right? And that's how it works. Yeah. So, yeah, they got to cooperate, but they also have to be specific at the application level by the vendor as to what's required of the system. And then IT comes to us and says, this is what the problem is. And we said, God, another $1 million of routers and upgrades to the fiber network and God knows what, right? So anyway, they got to cooperate. There has to be a definition of what the actual application demands. That's all I can tell you. And we have to decide, do you want a world with only I think you're working with the IT department is essential here. There's no doubt about it, because they'll come in with a complaint. You know that. So.
Well, let me throw this out. Are we trying to create a problem which may not exist at all?
Quite possibly.
Yeah, quite possibly.
I mean, look, they may communicate beautifully and coordinate beautifully, in which case this is a tempest in a teapot, right? I think we're just trying to think about how this can go wrong, because we've got so much invested in an IT system that in a digital learning investment that are actually working. So to get a response like Michael received from Ron that says, go talk to the schools about school IT, it is a little unsettling.
How do others feel?
I think we've covered it pretty thoroughly. It's the best idea I heard in this conversation is to have one person from the IT liaison side, one person from the school liaison side, to work together as a pair to look at school IT. And I also feel that we need to have a sit-down conversation with Ron to let him know that we really are looking to him for the due diligence. That's our expectation. So that's a proposal. Let's put it that's my suggestion to go forward.
Let me make sure I understand, Michael. You're suggesting that we have at least one person who's liaison to town IT, and that same person is also liaisoning with the school IT? Is that?
We have one person who is the IT liaison and one person who is one of the school liaisons, work together to look at the school IT.
Okay, just make sure they're communicating with each other.
Yeah, or working at the same time, meeting
Okay.
with the same people, hearing the same story and hearing the questions and answers. Two heads are definitely better than one.
I
It
mean, look, in
doesn't
a
have to
perfect
be
world-
the same, doesn't have to be the same person.
I don't
guess
think you
not.
want it to be just one person.
I don't know, I'm very flexible. I just want to do what we think is going to be the most efficient thing for the committee.
Look, in a perfect world, you just bring the IT liaisons into the school discussion to join for the school IT discussion, right? But then you've got a quorum issue. So that's why I'd suggested maybe one from each team.
Yep.
Because then you can actually do a liaison meeting without posting and having public meeting and all that other sort of
Yeah,
Right.
extra
And
stuff.
What the IT liaison learns from that conversation with school should come back to Ron Menard and the conversation there without Ron saying, look, it's not my thing. You got to just go deal with the school IT. I'm suggesting that we, as a capital budget committee, say to Ron, you are ultimately responsible for the school IT component under your town IT department.
I'm not sure we have the ability to tell Ron what, or should step into the role of telling Ron what his responsibility is, Michael. I think that was the lightning rod in the email chain that went around.
well, should we continue going the way we're going and see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, comes down to
Make
our
sure we
being,
communicate.
and we are the due diligent people here. And basically take it upon ourselves to make sure that we as a group, as a capital budget committee, feel that, yeah, we've really checked and what the school is proposing works within the town IT department funding and need, that it's been approved. It may be up to us to make sure that happens.
Just as a practical observation, I mean, while we certainly don't want to step into in sort of dictate what people's responsibilities are, because that will absolutely draw backlash. I think as a practical matter, we have the ability to force people to collaborate by the mere fact that we're probably just not going to get comfortable with these requests until we're certain that people have collaborated.
Right.
Yep.
It's going to be question number one, right?
Agreed. Right.
Anybody else have any other comments on this? Well, unless anybody has anything else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Unless everybody wants to stay up all night.
Just a quick question, Sam.
Yep.
When do you want to get at this information that you submitted by Don Piat? That,
Well, I'm trying to give him some more time. I need to talk further with him.
okay,
And I assume it's going to take another week. We can't meet next Monday anyway, because it's, I don't know, somebody's special day.
okay.
And so I'm pushing everything off until the 22nd.
Okay,
And I will probably know more by the end of this week.
Okay.
And I can let you all know.
Okay. I
And
think
we're
that's
also, we're
yeah.
waiting on the schools to get back to us
Yeah.
with their priorities.
Because when you look at
other
the
things.
picture is not pretty, as you can already tell. The picture is not pretty right now. It's pretty dismal. So I don't know where the money's
it's
coming
ugly.
from. It's ugly. You're right.
It's
So,
real ugly.
It's terribly
And
ugly.
the other thing that
Yeah.
Brian's pointed out, and I did a little bit more research on, we have some things that aren't even in the projection that should be in the projection.
Yeah, right.
You know, so we need to get better discipline in what we're looking at, and then we'll have information and maybe be able to deal with it properly. But I mean, my gut reaction right now is we're going to have to go for excluded debt again on the town hall project.
That would be, I think if you look at the past history, that should not be the first option. Because the worst thing
I
that could
agree
happen,
with you because
you're just asking at this time of year for even worse turn down than ever. I can tell you, right? People are not going to accept that at this
Yeah.
time. You know that.
well,
And
if we
this
went for,
blew, as you well know, it blew through what the selectmen agreed to. I guess something like they had voted 5-0 to make all of this fit within the budget only a couple of years ago. You know that.
yeah, well, one option is to look at all the school requests that you would probably borrow on and put those in a bucket for excluded debt, because that could probably pass.
I saw
But
that.
more on this later.
Yep.
Sam, I did have one question just before we break. Somewhere in the past 7 days, I saw something about Crocker Lane. Do you know anything about?
I know
There's
nothing
$1.25
about
million
Crocker.
in bonding for Crocker
Yep.
Lane. What is that?
I saw that. I don't know anything about Crocker Lane. Michelle's raising her hand. She has some top secret information.
So the town has been looking at a piece of property on Crocker Lane for, I would say, a couple of years now.
Yep.
I think when they first started looking at the salt shed dilemma as to, you know, could we relocate the salt shed? Maybe we can use MassDOT salt shed up there on Crocker Lane. We were doing a lot of research and we were in discussions with MassDOT about, you know, a lease option with their salt shed. And then it kind of shook out that they said, you know, we just can't manage something like that. We can't have you leasing our salt shed, us pulling from our salt shed. It's just a management nightmare.
Right.
So what they did ask if we were interested in purchasing a parcel of that land, which is, it's enticing to us because we could do a lot with that piece of land. They're offering us a piece of land lower, right on the Crocker Lane side. So it's almost at the base of the MassDOT property. So what we did is we went forward with a phase 1 study for environmental reasons to see, you know, if there's any contamination of the property, the history of the property. That phase 1 has been concluded. We are fairly comfortable with the results that came back. We will be speaking to representatives from MassDOT to find out some pricing and possibly start negotiating for that land. And when we were talking about AEC for Thursday night, the reason we'd like as many participants as possible is we're talking about bus storage, right? So if we were to acquire this piece of land, it may make sense to be able to put the bus depot, if you will, up there on Crocker Lane, as well as some facilities, workshop, or I don't know. I don't know what the entire plan is, but it has been cited as well as a nice place for some solar. So we're just looking at all of our options for that parcel of land. It's 2.5 acres, I believe, in size. It's fairly flat. And I think there's probably a lot we can do with it.
Okay, just to be clear, it's not the entire MassDOT site, and it does not include their salt shed.
If you'd like, I can probably pull it up quickly and show you the parcel that it
I know exactly what you're talking about. This kind of a long skinny concrete building right by, out close to Crocker Road
Exactly.
on the downhill side of the entrance road, into the MassDOT facility. The salt shed is all the way at the back end of the MassDOT facility. So it does not include that big parking area and the salt shed. Okay, so this is not an alternative to our salt shed.
It is not.
See, it kind of seems a shame that we have to look for a separate place for a bus depot, so to speak. But I guess now that we're not maintaining the buses anymore, there's no reason to be next to DPW. I'll leave it at that. Otherwise, we'll be going all night on it.
Okay.
Anybody want to adjourn?
So moved.
Who, did anybody move?
I think everybody moved, Sam.
What?
I think everybody so moved.
Well, I need one person to move to adjourn.
I move. I hereby move
Okay,
to adjourn.
thank you. Second?
Second. Mike, second.
Thank you, Michael. All those in favor? Susan?
Aye.
Ralph?
Aye.
Francine?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
And Sam would be aye.